very much. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you.
Well, this is amazing.
Or did you say?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kennedy School of Government, to the Institute of Politics. I'm David Pryor, and I have the high privilege of being the director of this great institute. The Kennedy family 35 years ago established the Institute of Politics. It is a part of the Kennedy School of Government. And during those decades of service and pride, the Institute of Politics and the Kennedy School, working as a team, has sent forth literally hundreds and hundreds of young men and women to every state in the Union and to almost every country on earth with an increased knowledge of government and a greater and more impassioned desire for public service and the commitment to make a better world. To be sure, there is no other place in the world like the Kennedy School of Government. We welcome all of you here this evening. I think that the late President Kennedy, might look down tonight at this wonderful event to see the young men and women from all over the world tonight, to hear our former Vice President, and he might say with us, this is what it's all about. It doesn't get any better. To Vice President Gore, what an opportune time to come back to Harvard, where he graduated in 1969. To come back here and tell us, in his own words, about the strength of America. What a moment to choose such a title. I had the privilege of serving alongside with him in the United States Senate. And sir, we welcome you back to Harvard. You are no stranger to this forum, and I might add that the Vice President in 1969 was a very, very active student leader when he was here, and we encourage that in all of you. To our new president of Harvard, I think we certainly owe a great, great welcome tonight. He is the 27th president. I remember Peter J. Gomes just about a year ago speaking in one of our suppers, Mr. President. He said, and now I want to talk to you about the race for the presidency. He says the race that really matters, the presidency of Harvard University. We welcome you, Larry Summers, a most distinguished American, a former Secretary of the Treasury, and what a wonderful and great honor to welcome you here this evening. Thank you. And this gentleman to my right has helped make all of this possible. He is Jerry McEntee. He is the president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, which is the largest union of working men and women in America. He tonight is making it possible for our former Vice President to deliver the Jerry Worth Lecture, and we're honored at this time to introduce to you Jerry McEntee. Jerry?
You're not speaking? Okay.
Thank you very much. Boy, what a crowd. You look wonderful. You look wonderful out there. I want to thank Senator Pryor for the very kind introduction, for pointing out the fact that we are the largest labor union in America. SEIU would be upset about that, but I'm very glad to hear it. I want to begin by saying that it is important in the midst of sadness and mourning for the tragedies that occurred on September 11th, to continue to move forward with our lives and indeed with the life of our nation. We think that's why it's appropriate that we have all gathered here today to hear the Vice President give the Jerry Worth Memorial Lecture. To begin with, and I think important point, we're here to honor the memory of Jerry Worth. His wife Mildred is here with us today, his son Nick, his daughter Abigail with us today, still lending support to her husband's ideas and ideals, and we thank Mildred Worth for that. I had the honor to succeed Jerry as president of AFSCME. He was a man dedicated to intellectual pursuits and to social justice. He was dedicated to fighting for respect and dignity for public service workers. And when disaster hit our country last month, it was public service workers, if you will think about it, who originally came to the rescue. Whether they were wearing hard hats and drilling in lower Manhattan, or they were wearing firefighter boots and walking into smoldering wreckage. Whether they were providing grief counseling or processing essential government assistance to families in need, America's workforce has continued to do their jobs. And by doing their jobs, they are keeping America strong and they are keeping America going. They're not wealthy folks. They arrived at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in ambulances, pickup trucks, fire trucks, police cars, not limousines. They are the 70% of our labor force that used to be called the working class, not supervisors, often not college educated, and until September 11th, in many cases, indeed not appreciated. These workers are a reminder to all of us of the importance, we believe, of public service. We are at the Kennedy School of Government, an institution dedicated to public service, to hear from a public servant, Al Gore. Al Gore has a strong pro-worker agenda as a senator, as a vice president, and when he ran for president. And I know he still is willing, and I know this in my heart, still is willing to stand side by side with working men and women in this country and support them and support their right to organize, because he believes it in his heart. Like so many Americans over the past few weeks, I know Al Gore has appreciated the amazing heroism and commitment to our country by everyday American workers by doing their jobs. Now that several weeks have passed, we have all seen some signs of recovery from the shock and horror of this national nightmare. People are starting to take planes, and I took one to get here today. But it's not the same as it was before September 11th. Nothing will or can or should be the same. After all, our country was attacked. America was attacked. And all the liberties and freedoms and all the things we hold dear as a nation were attacked. But as the civil rights anthem says, we shall overcome. The people of New York City shall overcome. The people of Washington, D.C. shall overcome. The people throughout our country shall overcome. Our firefighters, our EMTs, our office workers, our construction crews, and our school personnel shall overcome. That's what it means to be an American. That's what it means to live in America. Our common humanity and goodness has risen to the surface. People help people because that was the only option they could see. Not to make a profit or to be heroes on the 6 o'clock news, although many of them were, but many of them were in public service. Now is the time to consider or maybe reconsider your values and your goals. Now is the time to reach out to others and do good for the sake of doing good, just like American workers have always done. Thank you, and God bless America.
Al Gore is going to speak to us about the strength of America. In a moment, I want to say a few words about the strength of Al Gore. But before I do, I want to say a few words about public service. I want to recognize Jerry Worf, someone I knew well as his family vacationed near mine in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, and someone who I admired for his commitment to doing the right thing by the people he represented and doing the right thing by this country. You know, Jerry made what I think is a point that none of us at the university can make often enough or strongly enough, and that is the importance of public service. There was only one group of people who were going up the stairs in the World Trade Center on September 11th, and those were public servants. Public servants, people who are paid by taxes, people who were workers in the government of New York City, workers in the government of New York State, and workers in the government of the United States. And anyone who wants to say that government work is wrong, or that government is wrong, or that government is bad, should think about those people going up those stairs at that moment. We stand here at a forum of the Institute of Politics of the Kennedy School of Government, an institution dedicated, as David so eloquently described, to promoting public service, but also an institution that is part of Harvard University, an institution dedicated to teaching students and developing new ideas. Kennedy School, this forum, represent a judgment, a vision recognized years ago on the importance of marrying together ideas and public service. And that is what the career of the man we are going to hear from tonight is all about. Al Gore's had a distinguished career in government, 8 years in the House of Representatives, 8 years as Vice President of the United States, 8 years as a United States Senator. He has had a distinguished career at Harvard as a student, as an overseer of the university. All 4 of his children have attended Harvard University. There are many things that one could say about Al Gore, about his accomplishments in the House, the Senate, the Vice Presidency. But I think one of the things that, as someone here at this university, that stands out when I think about Vice President Gore is his commitment to serious thought, to serious research, to thinking through public policy issues, and then acting on the result of that thinking. Whether the issue is the environment, which has its salience today in no small part because of what Al Gore did in the late 1980s. Whether the issue is telecommunications policy, where we have the policies we have in no small part because of Al Gore's expertise. Whether the issue is something that Al Gore pushed very, very hard when he was in the government without getting the public attention that in retrospect it deserved, the challenge for the United States of how foreign policy deals with failed states that are unable to maintain control of their own borders. That is something that Al Gore was talking about all the time, was challenging all of us to think about in the early 1990s, at a time when many in the conventional foreign policy establishment regarded it as a flaky notion, or derided concern with failed states as some kind of social work, not the serious pursuit of national security. Al Gore was ahead of the curve then, as he has been so often in the past. There are, I would suggest to you, two groups of political leaders. There are political leaders whose views and whose ideas are of interest when they are political leaders, because they are political leaders. There is another group, frankly a much smaller group of political leaders, whose ideas of course have value when they are in office, but whose ideas have an independent strength because of their quality, because of their thoughtfulness, quite apart from the position that is held when they are offered. And Al Gore, as much as anyone in American public life, represents that second and much narrower tradition of political leadership. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Albert Gore.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. President Summers, thank you so much for those kind words. And David Pryor, my honored colleague and cherished friend, Jerry McEntee, Barbara, to the Worf family, Mildred and Abigail and Nicholas, it is truly an honor to give the Jerry Worf lecture, and to be here at this institution. You all are very lucky at this university to have Larry Summers as your new president. We worked together very closely. We were allies and became close friends. We've pulled all-nighters together on policy and battles over whether or not the budget was going to be handled correctly. Anyway, I'm really glad to be here. I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America. Thank you very much. You know, you win some, you win some, you lose some, and then there's that little-known third category. This has been a time of transition for me. As I said the other day, it sometimes is difficult. For example, they let other cars on the road with me now when I go out, and it's very, very, very disconcerting. And having not driven for 8 years, it may not be wise. I'm now teaching Middle Tennessee State and Fisk University. I'm a visiting professor, VP for short. Hanging on. You know, I almost didn't make any of those jokes because it's a time when we're all really still reeling emotionally from what happened on September 11th. And so I almost didn't, but you know, you see the courage of those who survived that attack, and they're moving on, and our country is moving on. It really is very inspiring, and I accepted this invitation to come and speak here because I do most everything that Jerry asked me to do anyway, but obviously before the world changed. And I read the purposes of this lecture series and of the other activities that are established here in the name of Jerry Worf, and truly it is an honor to be able to be a part of this program. And as mentioned, I wanted to talk about the strength of America. Well, now more than ever, it's abundantly obvious that the strength of America is our people and the unity that we feel, especially when we are attacked. But we have a unity that is different from the unity felt by other nations in any circumstances. And I don't think this is a point of chauvinistic, breast-beating pride. I really think that we are the exemplar of a group of people who have come together around a set of ideals. We're seeing a lot of changes in our world. Some nations are failing. We're seeing what you might call PostNational Entities. Al-Qaeda is one, a group that exists in 50 to 60 countries. It's not a nation. The nation of Afghanistan has given refuge to many of its leaders, but the nation of Afghanistan is itself very nearly a post-national entity. And when we confront a challenge like this, it really calls for new thinking. As President Lincoln said in his second annual message to the Congress, as our case is new, we must think anew. And he went on to say, we must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. I said in Iowa last week that President Bush is my commander-in-chief, and that our unity as a nation is stronger than at any time that I can remember in my entire lifetime. I'm grateful for that. It is important to remember why we come together and around what we come together. Franklin Roosevelt, during World War II, repeatedly said that our strength as a nation is found not only in our military might, not only in our soldiers and sailors and airmen, but in our working people, in the production of our factories and farms, and the commitment of our people to what the United States of America is all about. In that war, before we became involved in it, some important figures in organized labor, like Walter Reuther, for example, were among the most eloquent in our nation in defining the reasons why we needed to be involved. And last week in Iowa, I drove around part of the state in a car, and I heard about a labor dispute where the machinists had gone out on strike in a place called Middle Amana. The Amanas, it's an interesting story, utopian communities in the last century and 2 centuries ago now. And they were on strike. So I just got up early one morning and drove down there. They're out in the middle of very rural, sparsely populated area, and went to a Handy Mart nearby and bought a bunch of donuts and went to the gates and handed out the donuts. And we were talking there, and one of these men who were out on strike carrying a sign looked at me and just kind of out of the blue, we had of course talked about September 11th, but we had gone on and we were talking about what they were concerned about, health insurance, wages, working conditions. And then out of the blue he looked at me and said, "Hey, you tell President Bush that there are a whole lot of us that are ready to go if we need to. I'll go." And he was talking about the challenge that our country faces now. And his response was so basic and so in keeping with what our country's all about. It really was quite moving to me. This battle against terrorism is a battle for the value of human life and freedom against those who, for reasons of hatred or artificial constructs, do not attach the same meaningful value to life. In one of the interfaith ceremonies, and you don't mind if I take my coat off, do you? These? No, please. Thank you anyway. No. My humility would not permit that. Thank you very much. One of the faith leaders in one of the ecumenical services that have been held around our country said about 10 days ago that there were two kinds of people at the World Trade Center site and the other sites September 11th. One group was made up of those who were willing to sacrifice their lives in order to kill the innocent and inspire terror. And then there was a second group willing to sacrifice their lives in order to save the innocent and to rescue those who were in danger. As President Summers mentioned, that second group was made up predominantly of public employees, the group that Jerry Worth devoted his life and career to fighting for. If you look at the list of those who were involved in those sacrifices, you think of the firefighters, the police, union members, both groups, EMTs with AFSCME, AFGE, about 235 members of AFGE were in that complex. AFT, several members of AFT were killed in the plane crashes. Airline pilots, Communications Workers of America, 400 CWA members were in the World Trade Center towers, dozens more at the Pentagon. Electrical workers, 16 members of the IBEW. The flight attendants, 25 of them. Hotel employees, restaurant employees, 270 members working at the top of tower number 1. The machinists, like the fella in Iowa, there were members on the planes and others lost. Office and professional employees, operating engineers, painters and allied trades, plumbers and pipe fitters. All of these unions lost members. SEIU, Public Employees Federation, 15 carpenters 15 members of the Carpenters. I want to tell you about one public employee in particular who was given who was the first official victim that was taken by the police force, actually by the firefighters. Death certificate number 1. You may have read about Father Michael Judge, 68 years old, probably among all of the victims killed September 11th, remembered by more individuals because he was the chaplain of the New York Fire Department, one of them, an AFSCME member, as a matter of fact, 68 years old. He was a friar, and one of his colleagues saw a plane flying low and heard the collision and said to Father Judge, "I think you're going to be needed." And without a second thought, he quickly took off his friar's outfit and put on his chaplain uniform and rushed to the scene of the Trade Center attack, and he knew the firemen would be there. One of the firemen was killed by a collision with someone who had fallen from one of the upper floors. And Father Judge knelt beside him to give him the last rites. And out of respect, he took off his helmet to give the last rites, and the debris from the tower began to fall in larger quantities, and he was killed. The firefighters, who have a tradition of taking out their own from sites where tragedy has taken place, came and got Father Judge, wrapped him in a white sheet, took him to a nearby church, put his rosary beads in his hand, put his helmet and his badge on his chest, and laid him on the altar of the church. They wouldn't let him be taken to the coroner's office until they took him to the fire hall just a short distance away. And thousands of firefighters who knew him, he was a member of District Council 37, came to pay their respects. He was willing to go directly in harm's way out of what has been described in Scripture as no greater love. He exemplified both the sacrifice and the values of our country in this time of great peril. We should remember him and all of the others, those who were working that day, those who were visiting, and we should honor their memories by fighting for the values that bind us together as a country. I really think that we should also remember them in asking for a change in the attitude that some have had in past years and decades toward public employees. We need to recognize that the public employees of state and local and county and the federal government are working for us and breathing life into our representative democracy. So let's be done with this business of attacking them and criticizing them, and instead recognize faults when they exist, but honor them for the way they serve us and the courage that they show on a daily basis, making our democracy work. In the aftermath of the incident, right now there are 1,000 iron workers who have been cutting through millions of tons of debris. There are members of Local 78 of the laborers who are dealing with the sensitive task of handling the asbestos on the site. They've been trained for it. These people deserve our respect. And when Jerry talked about the importance of organizing, I'd just like to say a brief word about how that is related to the strength of America. There are men and women in our country who have trouble making enough to pay the rent and provide the basics for their families. Some of them, incidentally, work on this campus, and I honor the students who were involved last spring, and I know that this university that I love so much is going to find a way to come to an equitable solution, and the process that's underway has been making some progress. But there are a lot of people in America who are having a hard time. We as a people are now working far more than any other people in any developed, advanced economy on earth. And that time has been taken partly from families, partly from communities. There are many families that now work split shifts in order to take care of their families and also take care of their obligations at work. A lot of communities are kind of frayed at the edges because there's not there's not the kind of investment in community life and in civic groups. I see Robert Putnam over there nodding forcefully when I my daughter interviewed him for the Crimson and took him bowling to do the interview. Of course, the author of Bowling Alone has made this point that civic groups have not been receiving the same kind of investment. One of the reasons is that the intensity and amount of time that is being put into work is partly being taken from communities, being taken partly from families. The strength of America can be found not only in our military, not only in our workplace, but also in the vibrancy of our communities and the resilience and love and sharing of our families. Families and communities are both now under siege, in a sense. Both need more investments of time and energy. We have a time famine for many workers, in the phrase of Arlie Hochschild. One of the ways that people in the workforce address this kind of difficulty is by speaking up and asking employers to recognize the difficulty and do something about it. But for a long time, the lesson has been absorbed that that doesn't always work very well. And one way to remedy the imbalance in the conversation is for employees to be able to band together and speak with one voice. That's what organizing is all about. Of course, everything's a question of balance, and there have been times in our history when the pendulum has swung too far one way or too far the other way. But right now, organizing is a very important priority. Let me tell you one story that illustrates it for me. I met a man about 30, 33, 34 years old who was an immigrant to America from a communist country. He had actually left with his parents from a communist country when he was 1 year old, but did not make it to the United States until he was 16 years old. And he described his feelings when he came on a boat, classic scene. He sees the Statue of Liberty near the site that is the object of so much grieving now. And he was so inspired by the Statue of Liberty. It was the essence of what immigrants who have fled persecution feel when they come here. He began to make his way through the school system and got married, got a job, had a hard time. He was in California, and he went to several different workplaces, joined unions, didn't get what he felt was a just reward, was stretched thin, was not really enjoying life. His brother called him and suggested that he come to Las Vegas, where there was a vibrant, growing economy with higher wages and more opportunities. And so he went. And he went to a work site to sign up for work, and the employer there had a favorable and healthy cooperative relationship with the workforce and with the union that represented them. And after he signed his application, the representative of the employer said, well, now you'll probably want to join the union, so the sign-up table is right over there. And he said that he couldn't really believe it because of the hostile relationships that he had personally experienced between his previous employers and the organizations that had represented him before. And he said that as he walked toward the union table, he looked around to see if he was being photographed or if somebody was writing down his name, and he took another step, and finally he sat down to sign up, and he realized that it was real and that it was okay. And here's what he said. He said that at the age of 33, he said that was the first time since he was 16 years old, looking at the Statue of Liberty, that he had felt in his heart the same feeling of freedom that he felt when he came into New York Harbor. There are a lot of Americans who feel the need to have more freedom to spend time with their families, to become involved in their communities, to choose their own values in life and get off the treadmill a little more often in order to really enjoy what this country is truly all about. Jerry Worth fought for those values, fought for those people. This series is intended to keep that vision and those values alive, and it is an honor for me to continue in that tradition. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're going to have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes Q&A.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I just went to the president of Harvard University and I said, Mr. President, come on back up on the stage. You look so uncomfortable out there in that little chair. So he's going to rejoin us. Here's the deal. All right, are y'all ready? We're going to start right over here, and we're going to have a few questions for the Vice President. We want our questions very succinct and short. No speeches, no speeches. And we're going to start here, then we're going to that mic. I think there's a mic here, and then we're coming here. We'll make that circle a couple of times. So, question one.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm a master's student in the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. and
You've
my
got to speak up, please. Would you adjust that?
Is that better?
Yes.
You're a master's student.
In the Center for Middle Eastern Studies?
Okay.
My question is about civil liberties. Right now, at the Kennedy School, some certain students who are international students have given their, without their permission, the university has given their financial files to the FBI, and I was wondering what you thought about the role of civil liberties after this attack, and maybe if you comment on that.
I don't know the particulars of the inquiries you refer to. I just can't really comment on the equity or justice involved. I don't know what the basis of it is, but I will answer your question in general terms. Again, Franklin Roosevelt said that the great cause in which we are engaged cannot be won by ignoring the great values for which we're fighting. And I think there's broad agreement in our country that we have to protect civil liberties. We have to protect what America is all about. In times of conflict and danger, there are always difficult questions of balance that have to be addressed. But this, the business of profiling or stereotyping those who happen to be of the same ethnicity or religion of the perpetrators of this attack, that's unacceptable. And I say religion, incidentally. Their religion was not Islam, as Muslims recognize the faith of Islam. But my point is that we need to be very, very careful to protect the civil liberties of all Americans, regardless of their heritage.
Thank you.
Let's move right up here, please. And by the way, would you state your name and where you're from? You may be from Tennessee. He may want to recognize you from.
My name is Susie Flug. I'm from Washington, D.C.
Okay, Susie.
I'm very glad that you're here, Mr. Vice President.
Did you happen to go to National Cathedral School?
I've been a long admirer of yours for a long time, and you've said that you're a friend of the working people. I'm glad to have you here in this forum today. I just came from a different forum up in the Science Center. It was a workers' forum, and it was for the committee that's studying wages and employment conditions here. And you spoke a little bit about the struggle for a living wage here last spring. And I was just wondering what your response is in light of your remarks about organizing and workers and community responsibility to the fact that there are over 1,000 workers on this campus making poverty wages.
Well, I expressed my support for them, and last spring I called President Summers' predecessor on behalf of that cause. These things are often more complex than they appear on the surface, but I'm with the working men and women involved, and as I said earlier, I have a feeling of confidence that the committee that's working on this is, having made progress, is going to end up doing the right thing.
Let's move right over here, please. Yes, sir. You in the tie. Thank
Right
you.
here. My name is Josh Good. I'm a student at Harvard Divinity School here. You talked a lot, Mr. Gore, tonight about the sort of second level of what Dean Nye here at the Kennedy School has talked about, a sort of three-dimensional chessboard. You talked a lot about the economic reality. I'm wondering if you might be willing, in light of September 11th, to speak to either of the first or the third levels, the more political military level or reality in terms of foreign policy, or the third level of transnational non-state actors, specifically keeping in mind sort of who these terrorists are.
Okay, I'm not as immediately familiar with the three-level matrix that you're working from here, but I'm glad I covered at least one dimension. The political military part of it, I don't know. Let me deal with the transnational organization part of it. I'm going to have to read Joe's material. He's a smart guy. I'll have to look into that. I knew I was missing something. I think we are seeing the emergence of postnational entities. I think that our country is a little different from, it's a lot different from most, because, as I said earlier, we are bound together by a set of what we believe to be transcendent values and universal truths. That's what we assert. That was our revolutionary contribution to the world, and that is why we have been a destination reality for peoples from all parts of the earth. But in much of the world, we're seeing a spiritual disinvestment in the nation state. The nation state in its current form is said to have emerged in the wake of the print revolution, when civic knowledge was distributed over national groupings to the point where people saw themselves and identified themselves as part of nations instead of empires or city-states or what have you. Now, with the electronic broadcast media, the satellite, the internet, y'all know about me and the internet. It's a long story. Thank you very much. It is now disseminating, these new media are disseminating, you know, a zillion times as much information. Al-Qaeda communicates with its members over the internet, they believe, encrypted messages. It exists in 50 to 60 countries. I mentioned that there's a disinvestment in the nation state in a lot of other countries. And I think there is a reinvestment in two directions. First, toward supranational entities like the European Union, for example, some of the global organizations, and downward to subnational entities like regions and tribes. You have Quebec, Lombardy, Catalonia, Chechnya, all of, in Belgium, the Flemings and the Walloons are moving much more rapidly apart. And the bundle of investment that was the nation state for many of these people has been pulled a little bit apart. They don't, a lot of people in Europe don't look to their nations now for the enforcement of health and safety regulations or for protection. They look to increasingly to the European Union or to other supranational entities, and therefore the identity that they have invested in their nation states is now redirected in part toward entities closer to home. Their culture, their cultural traditions, etc. And in the midst of this reorganizing process, there are these transnational, postnational entities. Look at the drug trade, for example. Plan Colombia is in some ways similar to the war on terrorism. There is a nation that serves as the locus of many of the principles and much of the activity, but the nation itself is not the originator of the threat. Same thing with Al-Qaeda and Afghanistan. So it's very difficult. We're going through a process of reorganization that is going to continue to present us with new challenges, especially since national boundaries are more porous to people, to communications, to weapons. And so our response has to be not only military, but also economic, political, cultural, and there's a good and fruitful debate in our nation now on a bipartisan basis about how we can best pursue that kind of response. Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Vice President. My name is Lara Satrakian. I'm an undergraduate from New York City. The attack on America was seen by many as an attack on American values, values that we've sworn, fought, died to protect on behalf of people all over the world. How important do you think it is to extend the rights embodied in those values, rights like a fair trial and the best defense possible, to people like Osama bin Laden and the members of Al-Qaeda? And if by some accident or some aberration, a trial by
1969, I went into the Army. I ended up going to Vietnam. It was very complicated. This isn't complicated to me. It's not complicated like Vietnam was. Second point, it is extremely difficult for President Bush to find the right path here. Whoever was in the White House would face tremendous difficulty. I had the privilege of serving in the White House for 8 years and being close at hand when very similar decisions were put before us, some of them involving Osama bin Laden. And there are extremely difficult judgment calls that have to be made. And there's no doubt in my mind that in the weeks and months ahead, President Bush will be called upon to make some judgment calls that inevitably will fall in a way that some here and in our country will disagree with. Debate it, fine, but within boundaries, because he is the leader of our country, he is our president, he is the commander-in-chief of our military, and all of us, I think, should support the effort to respond in an appropriate and forceful way. I hope, therefore, that when time passes and when debates start about the stimulus package and there's debate about this bill and that measure and so forth, that even as we disagree about other things in America, that we find a way to remain as unified as we possibly can, because winning this war, and people debate whether the word is appropriate, but winning this struggle against terrorism is extremely important for future generations of Americans. And so I hope we can keep that unity myself. Okay.
Hi, my name is Teddy Kapoor.
And he said this has to be the last one. Go ahead.
From Texas. I'm a Master in Public Policy student here. Mm-hmm. My question relates to the question asked before, but I think it's important to talk about it and to stress it. It is the sense that since September 11th, there have been other attacks on Americans here in the U.S. In Arizona, an individual of Indian descent was shot. Mm-hmm. Mosques have been attacked. People of Arabic descent have been kicked off of airplanes after they boarded. Mm-hmm. Even here in Cambridge at the T station, an Arab graduate student was harassed. These types of attacks threaten our national unity, and I know it's important to stress that, as you did in your last response, and it's important to protect civil liberties. But what do you think local governments and communities should do? What do you think the president should do, since you should have been there yourself, in order to respond so these types of attacks don't occur again and don't really challenge the strength of America?
Well, I think President Bush did a good thing by going to the mosque in Washington, D.C. and making a formal statement there. I thought that was very effective, and I thought that was a good start. And there have been other statements when the service was held at the National Cathedral. A Muslim cleric was prominent in the program. It's part of what we're all about in America. And when I was driving across Iowa last week, I went to Cedar Rapids, and second largest city in the state, and I was reminded by some friends there when we were having coffee that the oldest Islamic center in North America is there. That's what they say anyway. And I talked with them, my friends there, and one of them said, well, why don't you go over there? So I did. And I stayed there for more than 2 hours, just informally talking with them, and the word went out on the telephone, and many, many members of the congregation came, and we had a very wide-ranging discussion. One of the older men, and much of the congregation has been born and raised in Cedar Rapids, and it's just a long-time institution there. And one of the older men said that the worst problem is faced by the women in the congregation, because the headscarves are distinguishing markers that serve as a trigger for discrimination. One of the women spoke up and told a story that was very moving to me. It didn't happen to her personally, but it happened to a friend that she knew in another community. She said that her friend had suffered discrimination and hatefulness because of her headscarf, and that a woman in a Christian congregation in the town sympathized with her, knew her, befriended her, and in response began wearing a headscarf herself. And that in her church, other women took up the same practice, and it spread to some other congregations. And pretty soon the haters couldn't tell the Christians from the Muslims and the Jews and whatever, and so it stopped. Now that kind of, I mean, that's really what the essence of America is all about. And I believe in my heart that this nation has a twofold mission in world history. We tend to concentrate on our mission of proving that freedom is our God-given birthright, and that that freedom unlocks a higher fraction of the human potential than any other way of organizing society. But I think we also have a second mission that is not as frequently held up. And it is because we have attracted people from every part of the earth, because we have been in this land between the two great oceans where generations came from older societies to start over again, and because we are such a diverse nation, we are looked to by peoples all over the world as a testing ground for the proposition that men and women of different ethnicity, race, cultures, religions can not only just get along together, but can enrich and strengthen one another in diversity. Now, you hear those words and maybe it just sounds like a boilerplate kind of thing. I hope not, because I really think it's a challenge that each of us has to undertake personally. And I'd like to tell you what I think is the way to go about it. William Julius Wilson is here. We've talked about some of these challenges, and with John, who wrote the color line, John Hope Franklin, said that the sum total of, he's the senior scholar of race in America, and he said the sum total of his scholarship is, and this applies to ethnicity and religion as well as race, I think, is that race is always present, and if you pretend it's not, then you know you're missing something. Religious difference, if it is known or obvious with a headscarf or some other marker, it's always present, and you shouldn't pretend otherwise. But if you approach it in the right way, the differences can be transcended with surprising ease. How do you do it? What is the right way? I think it's a two-step process. Number one, the establishment of mutual respect for difference, including recognition of any unique suffering that has come about because of that difference, such as the discrimination that Arab Americans have felt. An appreciation for the unique contributions that have come because of the different perspective and experience. And then after the establishment of that mutual respect, the second step is transcendence of difference. Now, why is it important to do both steps? Because it's all too easy for someone in a majority to say to someone in a minority, hey, let's just get along. Let's just get along. Because that can be heard by someone in the minority as being dangerously naive and devoid of any genuine recognition of what the difference in experience has been. I think that we as human beings are vulnerable to investing these kinds of differences with all kinds of emotional energy and spiritual energy. And the slightest difference can be the trigger for incredible outbursts of violence. Hutus and Tutsis are, to many of their neighbors, indistinguishable one from the other. But the difference, slight as it appears to be, serves as an excuse for the unleashing of this violence that really is not rooted in the difference. But the difference is invested with all this other stuff. Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland, largely the same people, same basic religion, different faith tradition. Again, we are horrified by the violence that is frequently made manifest there. We in the United States have women in congregations willing to put on the markers of another faith just to protect our respect for tolerance and diversity. All of us have the opportunity to fight that battle here in the United States. When you hear hateful speech, when you hear jokes that maybe you would let pass, speak up. Say, hey, look, you know, that's not what we're about. This is a new time. We are going to fulfill the mission of America. If that sounds kind of too idealistic to you, hey, to me it is just basic to what the United States of America is all about, and and is a part of the battle that we have to fight right now against terrorism. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
If I might, if I could, back in the Senate, we used to have a thing, we would say, Mr. President, I would like to rise on a point of personal privilege, and so if I may, Mr. Vice President, I would like to rise on a point of personal privilege and tell you a little bit of a story that happened here the morning and the day of September the 11th. At 9 o'clock, this TV screen, the big screen went on. We turned it on. And people gathered right here in this great forum room. First there were about 20, and then there were 50, and then there were 100, and then there were 200, and then there were 500, or I don't know how many hundreds. During the course of the day, they stayed. Dean Nye and the president of Harvard sent word, no classes, you can go home. Mr. President, no one left. In fact, more people came. I think that more people came, Graham Allison, because this great room that you so inspired not only was a place where people of goodwill and people of a common cause and people who come together and try to find answers to complex problems. I think they came here because they knew that people of goodwill would be here, would remain here, people here who really love to exchange debate, share ideas, engage in controversy. That's what this place right here is all about. And that's what makes us different. A gentleman from China came up to me that morning and said, Senator Pryor, I'm a student from China, but today I'm an American. And somehow or another, I think that's what this is all about. And Jerry, we thank you and we thank the family who have made this all possible tonight. Mr. President, we thank you. And Mr. Vice President, you have made this evening so wonderful for us at this time, and also you have made us once again believe that for this country, for all of us, and for this generation right here, that truly the best is yet to come. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks very much, David. Thank you. Enjoyed being here. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. I'll see you at dinner.
Yeah, but I'll send you an email about this lunch. It'll be good for you.
Yo. The day after the Oklahoma City bombing,
You all watching now?
President Clinton,
Algiers? I don't know. Near verdict, on the way to verdicts.
here we go.
Adam, thank you, thank you.
Wasn't this fun? Yes.
We get a picture, but it'll have to wait maybe till the next time he comes.
It's still so exciting. Like I couldn't imagine.
No, just like seeing him there.
I know. See you later.
Let's see if we can.
Hey, what's up? Doing good. How are you? Yeah, I was sitting in Stanley Hall. It was not my research.